Radhe Radhe. Today is Saturday, 8th March 2025, and here we are to present to you this recap video for today's Bhagavad Gita study session. As always, in the recent weeks, continuing along our journey of chapter 10. I'll bring up the slides momentarily and we'll take a look. We covered for chapter 10 verses 27, 28, and 29. Prior to that, of course, was the recap quiz covering chapter 10 verses 25 and 26. So please do take a look at the description for the video to get the usual link to the community portal page where you can get all these slides, including the quiz questions that are mostly not a part of the recap video, and a lot of other reference material. So with that, we get into today's content and look at chapter 10, verse 27 and beyond. Uchchaishravasam ashvanam vidhi mam amritodbhavam airavatam gajendranam naranam cha naradhipam. So, chapter 10, verse 27 has the catchphrase, all the king's horses. As we said in class, a reminder from a very popular nursery rhyme, but also importantly here, it covers at least two of the elements or the entities, the aspects, the vibhutis that Sri Krishna mentions that he is. So in chapter 10, verse 27, he says, amongst horses, he is Uchchaishrava. We see that that is begotten from the churning of the ocean of nectar. Amongst all the lordly elephants, he is Airavat, also, in fact, from the ocean of nectar. And then he is the king amongst humans. So, briefly, Swamiji mentions to us the fastest horse in the universe, Uchchaishrava, came out of the churning of the ocean of nectar, the ocean of milk, the Shir Sagar, as we said, and the Samudra Manthan episode. And so that belonged then to Indra. It was given to him, white in color, fastest, as we said, as we mentioned in class, seven horses, 7 heads. The horse has 7 heads. And Airavat similarly has 7 trunks. So each of them is white. Each of them actually happens to be the vehicle or a vehicle of Indra. And they are, of course, special celestial divine possessions emerging from the ocean of nectar. Another name for Airavat is Ardha Matang, which is elephant of the clouds. As we said, sometimes when Indra needs it to rain, this elephant of the clouds, Airavat, helps to provide that rain with the trunk taking water and then providing it, of course, to earth, etc. And then Sri Krishna, of course, says that he is the king amongst humans. Two ways, at least, to look at that, perhaps. He certainly has played in various avatars the role of a king. We've seen that as, Lord Ram. We've seen that for Sri Krishna, many other versions as well. And also at the same time, amongst the humans, we know that there are infinite avatars God has taken, will take, can take. And he, of course, is the supreme and the foremost. So also as a label there, he is the top, the best, the foremost, the supreme, the king amongst even the humans. So that's the essence here for chapter 10, verse 27. We'll next look at chapter 10, verse 28. Ayudhanam aham vajram dhenunam asmi kamadhuk prajanaschasmi kandarpaha sarpanam asmi vasukihi. So, chapter 10, verse 28 has the catchphrase Lord of Love. Lord of Love, because Sri Krishna says he is, of course, Kamdev, the god of love, and amongst all causes of procreation. Before that, he says he is Vajra, the thunderbolt, amongst all the weapons. And amongst all the cows, he is Kamdhenu. And amongst serpents, he is Vasuki. So we saw this long paragraph explaining how the Vajra had been formed or created, the story of the Puranas, sage Dadichi, Indra being chased out of his celestial kingdom, seeking help from that sacrifice of Dadichi and his bones, Dadichi having his last wish fulfilled, all the waters, of the holy rivers brought to him at Naimisharanya to save time. And then finally, of course, the Vajra was created. That thunderbolt is the one that took out the demon Vritrasur and restored Indra back as the king of the celestial abodes. So Sri Krishna mentions that amongst all the weapons, he is the Vajra. In Sanskrit, of course, we see that here as Vajram. He also mentions that he is Kamdhenu. In the translation, amongst all the cows, he is Kamdhenu. We mentioned in class, Kamdhenu, many of you are familiar with it, and it is, the wish filling or wish fulfilling cow. You often also see artwork of the Kamdhenu. You'll see like a big cow, and all across on that artwork or picture, you'll see many, many different deities, many celestial gods, many different avatars and variants of God as well, the supreme. And so all that is encompassed in Kamdhenu. Sri Krishna says amongst all the cows he is Kamdhenu. And of course we do know the cow is of course very, very sacred. We also know that in Sri Krishna's Braj pastimes as a Gopala, as a cowherd with his cowherd friends, he of course took care of and tended to all the cows, all the more extra special to him. Kamdhenu also emerged from the ocean of nectar from the Samudra Manthan episode. Then Sri Krishna says he is the God of love. He is again, remember, every god, any and every god. Here in this verse, he mentions he is Kamdev, the God of love. We talked about the episode of Lord Shiv's penance and how that divine penance, austerity, tapasya had to be broken by Kamdev so that humankind could also have love and procreation. And so we briefly mentioned that in class. So Kamdev there, often also known as Cupid in a more common English sense. Sri Krishna says he is Kamdev. Sri Krishna says also when it comes to sexual activities, he is the source, he is the origin. Amongst all causes for procreation, he is that source, origin, beginning. He is the purpose. We also know, of course, he is the medium, he is the vehicle. Swamiji reminded us also that in chapter 7, verse 11, Sri Krishna had declared he is sexual desire that arises in humans and the one that is not in conflict with virtue and scriptural injunctions. Again, the overall purpose, the dharma, is to procreate for the purpose of, as Swamiji says, begetting worthy progeny, getting and raising good kids, kids with good values, virtues, dharma, and so on, with bhakti, of course, as well. So that is the essence of chapter 10, verse 28. And then we see chapter 10, verse 29, Lord of Law. Anantaschasmi naganam varuno yadasam aham pitrinam aryama chasmi yama sanyamatam aham. So as I said, chapter 10, verse 29, Lord of Law. In fact, if you remember in class, chapter 10, verse 28, we said is Lord of Love, happens to have the acronym LOL. Chapter 10, verse 29, Lord of Law, also has the acronym LOL. So as I said in class, next time you're chatting away on some, social media platform or text messaging, etc., if you're using LOL for laugh out loud, you might also now get that as an opportunity to remember the Supreme Lord as part of our duties to try to remember God 24/7. LOL, Lord of Love, LOL, Lord of Law. In chapter 10, verse 29, Sri Krishna says that he mentions another snake. Amongst the snakes, he is Anant. Amongst aquatic creatures, he is Varun. And amongst the departed ancestors, he is Aryama. And amongst the dispensers of justice, amongst the dispensers of law, he is Yamraj. In fact, that reminds me, I missed mentioning Vasuki here amongst serpents. So for chapter 10, verse 28, we first see one snake. Sri Krishna says that he is Vasuki. Again, Vasuki is one of the foremost of all the snakes, the nags. It's the one that you see wrapped around Lord Shiv's neck. So that is Vasuki. And I also mentioned that fossils have been found just about 20 years ago. And that species, in fact, is considered to be the largest snake in the world, somewhere between 36 to 50 feet in length. Second snake, then, that is mentioned, chapter 10, verse 29, where we are. Now we see Anant. We actually have talked about Anant in recent weeks and even way back in chapter 2. Anant are also known as Sheshnag. So that's another divine serpent, divine snake. That's the one on whom Lord Vishnu rests. So Sri Krishna says amongst the snakes, he is Anant. That's the one with 10,000 hoods. Lord Vishnu and Lakshmi, they rest on Anant. Anant, we've talked about recently and in chapter 2, and Swamiji reminds us here as well. Anant has been singing the glories of God. with each of his hoods since the beginning of creation, yet he is not done. And he won't be, because there are infinitely many glories of God. We can only hear about or read about a finite small set of them. Anand can, of course, do much more. But even then, he's been singing about them since the beginning of creation. He's not yet done. That again helps stress the context and the magnificence or the enormity of the amount of glory and vibhutis that Sri Krishna has. Sri Krishna also says that he is Varun. We all know Varun is the celestial god of the ocean. We often hear them in the context of the celestial gods, Indra, Varun, Agni, Kuber. So Varun is to do with ocean, with water. Sri Krishna says amongst the aquatic creatures, he is Varun. And then he says amongst the departed ancestors, he is Aryama. I took you to chapter 10, verse 21 in class, where we had actually first seen Aryama. There were 12 sons of Aditi. Aryama is the third son of Aditi. In fact, in chapter 10, verse 21, if we go there, we had seen there that Sri Krishna says amongst those 12 sons of Aditi, he is Vishnu, the supreme, the foremost. Other sons, 12 of them, 11 of them, other ones beyond Vishnu. The third one is Aryama, and that is the one who Sri Krishna mentions here in chapter 10, verse 29. He is, in fact, Aryama is the head of the departed ancestors. So he is worshipped in that context. And then Sri Krishna says, amongst the dispensers of law, he is Yamaha, he is Yamraj. Yamraj, we know, is the celestial god of death. Swamiji explains Yamraj's duty here. He arranges to take the soul from this mortal frame, the corporeal body, after death onward. I again mentioned in class about chapter 2, Swamiji had mentioned that there's a little bit of a time gap sometimes, and a suitable womb is found for that soul's next lifetime, unless, of course, it's going to the divine abode of God. And in this case, Yamraj and his Yamduts, his associates, his messengers, they are the ones who arrange for this dispensing of punishment or rewards on behalf of God. They serve the Supreme Lord. They are performing this duty. Swamiji says Yamraj doesn't deviate even an inch, though it is sometimes gruesome and painful. But again, the extent of this power as that perfect dispenser of justice, that is what is embodied as a vibhuti or an opulence of Sri Krishna, and of course shown in the role of Yamraj. So those are the three verses we covered today. Let us take a look at some important Sanskrit words, maybe just one or so from each of the verses. Let's take a look at Amritodbhavam, which is made up of Amrit Udbhavam, begotten from the churning of the ocean of nectar. We've talked about the Samudra Manthan. We talked today and learned about a few of the entities that emanated from that. Amrit Udbhavam means begotten from the churning of the ocean of nectar, or the ocean of milk, Shir Sagar, the Samudra Manthan episode. Then the next one we can take a look at is here. Let's look at Prajanaha, which you might recognize in an English context as well, related to progeny. So amongst causes for procreation, Prajanaha. So that's from chapter 10, verse 28. And finally, from chapter 10, verse 29, let's take a look at this one, Sanyamatam. That is amongst dispensers of law. Sanyamatam. And we see the foremost example of that is Yamaha or Yamraj, the celestial god of death. I'll take us to a flyer, which I realize we didn't get a chance to cover in class. So let's take a look at the question and the image. No horsing around, no, as they say, playing around. Do you know of a zoo that was once underwater? Now, we presumably all know the answer, and there are some hints, of course, given in the image. We're trying to represent, of course, Uchai Shrava, Airavat. There's Kamdhenu somewhere. There's much more. You even see lotus flowers, lilies, etc. All this, and if we recognize maybe nectar around us, that's the ocean of nectar. The zoo is, in fact, all this, universe consisting of Uchai Shrava, Airavat, Kamdhenu, etc., that were underwater, so to say, because they were begotten from the churning of the ocean of nectar. So truly no horsing around, no kidding, no playing. Horse, of course, elephant, cow, much more. They all were part of that zoo that was once underwater, begotten from the Samudra Manthan, the churning of the ocean of nectar. Final comment is, as we said in class as well, starting tomorrow, which is March 9th in the US, there is going to be a time change due to daylight saving time. So, what you, for instance, see on this flyer, today we met at 8 a.m. Central Time, 7:30 p.m. India time. From next week, when we continue, it'll be still 8 a.m. Central Daylight Time, but it'll become 6:30 p.m. India time. And in many other countries as well that do not follow daylight saving time, your start time will be 1 hour earlier than normal. So please note that. Please write it down or set it in your alarms. Certainly, we would like all of you to be able to attend class without missing it because you were an hour late due to the time change. So the time change impacts, of course, North America, USA, Canada, but it has that ripple effect in terms of these classes for the other countries as well. If in doubt, remember 8 a.m. Central Time and then use a time zone converter to determine the start time for your country. So again, we shall meet at that new time in certain countries, still 8 a.m. Central Time, 6:30 p.m. India time, next Saturday, which will be 15th March 2025. Till then, thank you so much. Take care and Radhe Radhe.